All right, that took a little longer than usual, but I believe we are live. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Stone Guy 223, and we've got gun websites on my far left. May have stepped away. And next to him. Oh, right on, right on. So G Webs is down there. We've got Moon Food,
What's up? Thanks for having me.
and we've got, what is it, Night Strike?
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Is that your channel name as well?
That's not my channel name. My channel name is Night Strike. That's my username. I also am starting a live show called Hit or Miss.
Oh, right on. So check that guy out on YouTube, Hit or Miss. And as always, somewhat brought to you by gunchannels.com. That's a community that gun websites created. Gunchannels.com is a forum of like-minded individuals who get together and we talk about guns and gear and everything, everything in between. No worries, brother. Have a good one. So gunchannels.com got a list of all the live events. You've got different forums for whatever your interest is, whether it's reloading, sport shooting, hunting, whatever. There's something there for everybody. So if you haven't heard about it or you haven't checked it out, it's completely free of charge to go over and see what it's all about. So now that that's out of the way, got a little different topic tonight. I wanted to throw something out there and just see what happens. It's going to be taking questions from the audience and suggestions as well, so I'll keep an eye on the YouTube side and on the gun channel side. But just wanted to throw out the conversation. The title of tonight's chat was, Can Training Really Save Your Life? And just wanted to throw out the question for people. Me personally, I'm a big proponent of training, but there's also that individual who thinks they've taken one training course and they're like operator as hell and they can take on the world because they've had one day of training, and I think that could be a dangerous. What's the word there? A dangerous combination of overconfidence that could potentially get someone killed. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm phrasing that correctly or if you guys get kind of the gist of what I'm trying to say. It's like anything that you've done once or twice, and you gain a certain amount of confidence in your ability because you've done it before. So I think that could carry over to training, firearms training, and I think some people that do take a training course, they build up a certain confidence, and they maybe get a little too cocky, or they assume that given a potential lethal force or deadly situation, that they're going to be able to perform as they trained. And I just wanted to throw it out there and see what you guys thought.
I'd like to see numbers, like the numbers of just regular civilians that have taken training and are fairly dedicated to it, that have actually had to deploy that training in a self-defense scenario. I don't know if there's such a statistic, but I'd like to know that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I know James Jager's pretty vocal about it. His school.
Yeah, he's got students that had actual self-defense.
Right, and he talks about it if you take his class. For those of you that may not know, James Jager's Tactical Response, and he speaks about it in his classroom session, I guess, for lack of a better term. There's a day of shooting and a day of classroom lecture. That's the word I was searching for. So during his lecture time, he does talk about the fact that he's had students that have had lethal encounters and they've come out on top. Now, for take it for what it's worth, whether or not that was a direct, you know,
Result.
right, a direct result of his training class or other training classes that these people may have taken, or if it was just the fact that they were prepared and the other person wasn't as prepared. Who knows? I guess that's really the ultimate question. Does it come down to training and preparedness, or does it sometimes just come down to blind luck?
Well, luck is preparation, right? And then perspiration or something like that. So, preparing and then practicing. So I would say that since I got to head out of here, there's there's the perception that if you go to a training class, you think you're invincible, and that's the same as, or I think it can be equated to the anti-gunners who will hear us talk about carrying every day and then liken us all to some sort of like pathetic wannabe supermen or like lone rangers or something. So for us to suggest that somebody who goes to a training class to experience it and to learn some things, and then that's all they get out of it is a superficial like mockery type of thing, is selling it short, because especially with tactical response and a lot of the others that are good, they're teaching you mindset. So they're not there to teach you the nuts and bolts of what exactly to do. It's not like a dance routine where you're learning the choreography, or like a martial arts kata where you're learning like a specific little set of series of moves and stuff. It's not like that. You're going to these classes to experience what your gear and what your head and what your arms and legs and shit can do, and they have you go through some drills and things to, uh, you know, have you go through the motions and then determine if you're able to put everything together and get effective hits down where you need to. But it's all about the mindset. So go into one of those classes and experiencing what is available and what there is to know lets you know what there is to know and what you don't know. So those people that just mock it don't even know what they're mocking and are mocking the thought of it, not the actual experience of it.
Absolutely. No, I think that's what's well said. And I'm glad you brought that up as far as the actual mindset, because that's definitely something I want to touch on, is the fact that I think training, and a lot of times when you think of training or practice in any application, or whether it be sports or firearms, or if you're a chess player, anything, you think of the physical, or the actual, the actually pulling the
Practice.
trigger, right? Well, the practice on anything is the physical action, is what most people equate practice to or training to. But a bigger part of that, like G Webb said, is the mental aspect. And more so in firearms training, I think, than any other, you know, athletics, whether it's, like I said, baseball or soccer or whatever. There's a mental game to every physical activity. If you're a runner, or what I mean, if there's mental parts to all of it. But I think the firearms side of it, especially the self defense application, there's way more of a mental preparedness and a mental aspect that far outweighs the physical action, if that makes sense. Excuse me. You
Yeah,
know what I'm
well,
saying? Like, does that make sense? You know what I'm saying? Like, I
that
think
makes sense.
you have to be more mentally prepared to carry a firearm, to have the potential of a lethal force self defense situation, way more than you have to actually have trigger time and pull the trigger on a gun.
Here's a question for you. Do you think instead of just taking one course that it might be better for, say, a beginner to take multiple courses?
Oh, absolutely. I think I don't think you should ever stop searching out and taking training
I don't think
ever.
just even one course will hurt you at all.
No, but you
Oh
shouldn't
no,
expect to be a
no, no.
Rambo after one course.
No, well, it depends on what you take away from it and the amount of discipline you have and what you put into what you've learned from that one course. So it'll vary from person to person.
So it's more of a how much effort you put into the course that you take away.
Yeah, pretty much. There's a martial aspect to learning any kind of self-defense, and it takes discipline and dedication.
I
Yeah,
agree.
I think that could go across the board to anything you do. You know, if you're given the opportunity to practice, God damn, excuse me, I have the hiccups. To practice or train in something, the level of effort and dedication you put into that training is, I think, is going to be a direct result of what you get out of it. You know, if you just go through the motions and are just half-assing it, then obviously you're not going to be as well prepared or get as you know get the full potential that you have in front of you.
Like I don't know any for certain, but I'm sure there's guys out there that take as many classes as they can to collect certificates to hang on their wall, and they're not really putting any of that into practice. You know what I mean? I don't know any personally, but I can see that being the case with some people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you have that in every in well, like with IPSC, when our competition shooting, we refer to those as paper champions, so to speak, in the sense of there's a lot of guys that will classify on paper, whether it's at their home range or whatever. That the way IPSC is set up and the way you do your classifier, there's usually one or two courses of fire in a match in a 6 stage match. Um, and one of those stages will be a classifier, and sometimes two, right? And so your classifications is a first six and then a rolling four, or vice versa. I always get those mixed up. Or the first four and then a rolling six. So when you shoot a classifier, if you screw up, you can pay $3 and reshoot that stage, right? So you'll have guys that'll fuck up and they'll pay to reshoot it, and they'll pay to reshoot it, and they'll pay to reshoot it until they get it their score. You know, until they do good and get their score that actually gets turned into USPSA. You know, the organization to count towards your classification, whether you're, you know, an A shooter or a master shooter or whatever. So we call those paper champions because these guys truly, you know, if it came down to it, like you're only as good as what you can do on the moment. You don't get to fucking repay and reshoot in real life. You know what I mean? So it's kind of crazy to think that there's guys out there that really brag about, you know, like if they're a master level shooter, but every fucking time they classify, they have to do reshoots just so they can get um, that classification. So it's kind of shitty in that aspect of people, like you said, that are doing it just for the trophy, so to speak, or just for the accolades that go with that accomplishment, but it's really not a fair. it's not a real fair representation of what they're actually capable of because they've had so many chances to redo it.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, let's not all talk at once here.
Yeah, I can hear the crickets.
No
There's
shit,
something wrong.
man.
Well, it's because we don't have Yankee here right now. He'd argue up a storm with you.
That's quite all right. I think
Yeah.
I'll be just fine without the youngster in here. I
Why
don't
don't we
see
bring up
anybody
some of
answer
the
questions.
some of the
Yeah, I mean,
topics?
we don't have to stay on this topic for sure, but
No, I mean,
like I said, this just throw it out there. But um, I'm looking on the Gun Channel side and the YouTube side, and I don't know one's
some
asking
other
any
people
questions.
mentioned that it's more like don't stop training, keep training because the more proficient you get, the better you will be. You know, you won't be the best, but constantly training and being proficient at it is better than not being proficient.
Well, yeah, that's with anything. But I guess, and that was kind of, and then I guess we need to touch on the actual topic of, or the title of the thing was, will training save your life? Let's fast forward to the whole thing of you're some dude that's taken, you know, you take a class a year and you're super good. You dry practice every day. You fucking quick draw your holster. Like you're in your mind, your operator is fuck. Like you're tier one. You beat everybody in your little local competitions at your local range. You know, you 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 do your draw to first shot in 1 second on a timer, and like you think you're the shit. Now let's go to real life, and something happens, and you got bullets flying at you. Is that gonna make a difference in real life? Is that gonna carry over into a stress, adrenaline induced life or death situation? Will that training save your life, or will it not make a difference?
I think to a certain degree, it'll help you, or I guess it'll get you in the mindset for being prepared for such a situation. But let's be honest, someone who's just taken one or two courses, or even if they've taken several courses, no one is really prepared to get shot at in a situation. I mean, no one expects to get shot at, period, but, preparing for it is better than not preparing at all.
Well, and that's the argument. I mean, that's the thing. And there again, we're just talking for the sake of having a chat on Thursday. Just throwing out the topic. Obviously anybody could say, well, yeah, it's better to do something than to do nothing.
Obviously.
But just playing devil's advocate. God damn, I can't believe I've got the hiccups. It's driving me nuts.
Get the paper bag.
Right. Hyperventilate myself. But that's just playing devil's advocate again. Is the fact that can you truly reap? And there's great tactical response. You'll probably hear me mention them a lot because he's a fucking stand-up guy. He's a great trainer, and he's literally a great person. Like, some people think he's a prick, a cocky asshole, and he comes across that way if you don't know him. But James Yeager is probably one of the nicest, most accommodating, like really good-hearted men you'll ever meet in your life. And he does a force on force with simunitions and tries to recreate that actually getting shot at. mean, you actually hear the gun, you get hit with projectiles. I mean, it's as true to getting shot with a real bullet as you can recreate in a safe training atmosphere. But even then, I still don't think, to some extent, that you're gonna be prepared for the natural uh, adrenaline. Because I've taken those classes, and to a certain degree, because going into a situation that it's training. So no matter how well they do it, psychologically, I don't think you can ever get it out of your mind that it's training. Therefore, there's always that lack of true adrenaline. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know. It's kind of like going to a haunted house. Like that all the shit's fake, so your adrenaline is not going as much as if you walked into a place and something scary happened, like naturally, then you'd really freak out. Same principle. If you really got in a gunfight in real life, that that element of true life or death can never really be recreated in a training atmosphere. So you're gonna have that natural adrenaline, that natural high.
What do you think? Mindset is something that can be taught, or is it something that has to click with the student?
Glad you brought that up, because I'm glad. That's perfect. You played right into my hands there. That's exactly what I've wanted to stress, is that part of it. You cannot recreate adrenaline. You cannot recreate scary, life-threatening moments in training. But a mindset a mindset is a mindset. You don't need that. That there's no real or not real when it comes to your mindset. That's something you have control of at all times. That's something you can practice or train for or educate yourself 100% of the time. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to have. There's no scenario that's going to make you think a certain way. Your mindset is your mindset. So absolutely, I think you can. I think the more the more educated you are, and the more training and the more seminars and lectures that you go through with people like James and Aaron Cowan from Sage Dynamics. I hope I said his last name right. Um, Way of the Gun. Um, what's his name? Frank Proctor, Way of the Gun. Taking one of his classes. He's a squared away dude. Good instructor. You know, those kind of guys that can truly teach you mindset. And that's what I think people should be really focused on when it comes to training. I think you should really be focused on the mindset, the mentality, the warrior spirit, in a sense, that that sense of when shit goes down, you're going to run towards the fight and not away from the fight. That's something that, oh, excuse me, that's something that you can train for without a gun in your hand. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yep.
So if anybody I got links out. If anybody else wants a link, let me know. We got plenty of room, and we need some people in here to talk. No one's talking on the YouTube side or the gun channel side. I'm not seeing any.
Well, they were, but they were talking about what we were talking about earlier.
Dr. Gino. Let's see. Said that's an honest and true assessment for all of us, but there are things you can do to delay your adrenaline dump and be able to function in it. There's still a wall, but you can move the wall back. That's a good that's a good. Sorry, reading through some comments here, see if anything's. Yeah, keep it going. Oh yeah, there we go.
Find anything?
G asked for a link, so I just dropped a link in there. All right, so have you guys, while we're waiting to get some things in here, have you guys taken training? Anybody in the chat here? All two of you?
I've taken one class from a local guy when I first bought a handgun, and it was only $100, and it was just like basics for self-defense and Pennsylvania laws. But other than that, I have had no tactical training, I guess you can call it.
I haven't had tactical training either. I've had Boy Scout and home cowboy training in Arizona, but that's about all.
Now, does Pennsylvania require a class to get your concealed carry?
No.
And then where are you at? You're in South Carolina, right?
Yeah, I'm right out of Charleston.
So, does South Carolina require any type of training course for concealed carry?
Yeah, you're required to go through like an 8-hour course for concealed carry. You're also required to submit, just a passport picture and submit, fingerprints. I'm looking at doing it. I've been berated by Moon to go out and get it, so I'm going to work on that.
Are you telling me you don't have a concealed carry permit right now?
No, I don't want to get fingerprinted, but I'm going to have to anyways.
Oh, what do you mean? Why not? What's your?
I feel like I'm being criminalized for something I didn't do. If I have to get fingerprinted. Granted, that's my own paranoia, of course.
Well, I understand. I understand some people have that whole thing because it's you're having to pay for a constitutional right in a sense. You're paying for a license that
it's given to you by the Constitution.
Right. So I know a lot of people have that same contention where they're like, why should I have to do that? But unfortunately, that's a state thing, and you got to play their game in order to.
Yeah. I'm going to go out and do it. I just have to find a better place than the local one in town, because the guy who does it in town here, he's a snake. Truer words haven't been spoken.
If he's the only one that does it, he's probably got a little monopoly going on too. So he's.
Yeah, because he ran the other guy who was running a gun shop in town out of business.
So Dr. G just joined us here. What's your? Is that my calling you the right thing there, G?
Yeah, you can call me G. No, whatever.
No, Dr. G. No. So appreciate you jumping in. So you had a good bit to say in the gun channel side. So I'll give you an opportunity to kind of get the conversation going a little bit here.
You were talking about training and tactical response and simunitions, and it's not just that. There's like other things too as well. Any sort of relatively extreme activity like motorcycles, especially if you get into racing, which would be sort of like the training equivalent of it, where you're on a track in a more controlled environment and you can stretch yourself. You know, we all have a wall. We all have that like adrenaline dump wall, and you have to be able to function in that biology, but you can move that wall, you know, depending upon your life experience and depending upon things you do and depending upon things you enjoy. So, yeah, you know, something may trigger your adrenaline sooner or faster than mine. Eventually, we all hit the same place. And like somebody made a comment in the chat about you really don't know what's going to happen when the bullets start flying, no matter what you think or what you believe, and this is where our egos get us in trouble. But things like the force on force, the simunitions, and just being able to function in, relatively speaking, you know, high adrenaline environments. We see this every day in people. We watch people freak out over something. We look at them and we go, man, what are you freaking out over? Okay, it's basically just a mindset, and then coupled with that mindset is, you know, what experience do you have? You know, we hear all that thing about, you know, in the adrenaline dump you lose all your fine motor skills. Okay, they do decay. You don't lose them completely, or there'd be no such thing as a fighter pilot. But you need to train to that point if you want to be there. If you expect it's just going to occur, then you're sorely mistaken, and you can prove that to yourself by doing something infinitely less dangerous than going out and getting in a gunfight.
I agree. I agree 100% with that. That's a good way to put it. And while you were talking, we did have Yankee hop in and join us. So,
I'm just listening and trying to figure out what the topic is.
well, basically, I was just talking about how, um, you know, will training actually save your life? You know how.
I mean,
You
it
know how
could.
much.
I mean, it's not going to make you less likely to survive. So, I mean, if you want to look at it as just a logical standpoint, it's not going to make you less likely to survive. Well, you know, there is an argument to be made too, and I've heard this argument made by ex-police officers, etc. You know, ex-military people, that there's also the Rambo effect. There are some people will train and it gives them the Rambo effect, where
Exactly
they
what I was
think I've
talking about.
trained now, so now I can
Yeah,
handle anything. So they put themselves in situations that they shouldn't get into, and it can get them killed. So I guess in a
absolutely.
way, training can get you killed, but it's not the training itself. It's what mindset you allow yourself to get into
Yeah.
because you trained. It's not the training
Well,
itself.
that's exactly what I said to start the chat. I said, in a sense, you know, you have that element of people, and it's all relative, and it's, you know, it's going to be depending on that person's
Well,
personality.
I didn't hear you, or else I would not have repeated it.
No, no, that's fine. No, because I'm just glad you kind of reiterated the fact that, you know, you do have that certain element of people that will take one or two training courses, and then they believe that, oh well, hell, I'm operator. I've had training. I can take on a whole army now, and
Yeah, well, it's
you
that.
know,
It's the people that they will allow that extra little bit of security they have from being trained to allow their judgment and their situational awareness to be affected to the point where they don't think they have to avoid. Like, I'm not going to cross the street because these swarthy-looking guys are walking this way. I'm going to stand my ground. Where normally they'd cross the street, I'll cross the street. So if you keep your wits about you, if you're the person that is not going to allow your base level of common sense to be affected, training is not going to degrade your ability to survive in any way. It might even increase it. Now, are you ever going to be in a situation where your training is even going to make a difference? Probably not. That's one of the great things about living in a country like we live in. We don't get in gunfights very often,
right.
but it's not going to hurt your chances.
But and then the other thing was the fact that, so you definitely have that element of people that think they're going to be invincible because they've had training, and then on the flip side, you get that element of people that think, well,
Well, I had
or
a lieutenant colonel once tell me that some of the most badass soldiers he's ever met in his life were killed by a lucky shot.
well, yeah,
So
you definitely have that, but
So it
then
doesn't matter how much training you have. If someone else gets a lucky shot, you're not invincible. So
and then you have the whole never being able to recreate the true
Well, no.
adrenaline rush.
No, you're never going to be able to. You can simulate heart rate, you can simulate adrenaline, you can simulate things like that, but you cannot simulate that cognitive recognition of danger.
Right.
Your body absolutely works differently when it recognizes a clear and present danger. I mean, you fire on different synapses, different pathways in your brain become active, the muscles respond differently. It's different, and it's been proven physiologically to be different. And we can recreate a lot of what happens during a dangerous situation, but the thing we can't recreate is that cognizant recognition of danger. And unless you have that, you're never going to have the full experience of what it's like to be shot at. But like I said, once again, something is better than nothing, and it's not going to degrade your chances of surviving. It's going to increase them probably. So,
along those lines too, it's also about, to you personally, what constitutes a clear and present danger. It may not be absolute, like, oh my God, somebody's shooting at me. And that's where you can move the wall, is what comfort level do you have with certain situations, and when does that cognitive thing, like Yank just said, when does that immediate, now this is the clear and present danger, the bullets are flying, there's your wall. Okay, so again, it's about how comfortable can we be moving up to that wall, and how far can we push that wall back.
I can remember very clearly, and this is a personal recollection, I can remember very clearly sitting on an earth mover and going, what is that noise? And just being slightly interested and puzzled until someone said, we're taking fire. And then when my brain went, oh, taking fire, that means you're about to be shot, that switch went off. And it is extremely noticeable, and it's not like nothing you'll ever experience in your life when your brain says, hey, body, get the fuck out of here, you're about to die. You know, that is something you'll never, ever, ever be able to recreate without that actual experience.
Right. And so then, and you know, not, and I hate to be redundant for the people that have been watching the whole time, but
how long have you been on?
Just we started about 9:40, so about 20-30 minutes. So
okay.
So for you and Dr. G over here, the bigger thing that I wanted to get across to people was the fact that, you know, we agree we can't recreate the adrenaline, but one thing I think we can train and
to me, it's mostly really the coordination. It's the coordination you need to develop.
Well, coordination to an extent, but the mindset, the mentality is something you can practice and train without ever having to pull the trigger. What kind of mentality
are you talking? Because I don't know, because I know some people that.
Well, I'm talking
there's a small number of people that could not pull the trigger. They would freeze up if they ever had to pull
and that's
the trigger.
What I'm talking about. You've got to, I think, you've got to, if you're willing to strap a gun on every day and take that responsibility of being a concealed carrier, then you have to get your mind right. You have to have the mentality of running towards, like, if some shit breaks out, you run towards the fire, not away from the fire.
I still, armed or unarmed, I run the other fucking way.
Well, that's just a.
But to me, the whole thing about
that wasn't literal. That's just the
but to me, the thing about, you know, will you pull the trigger? Can you take someone else's life? That's a question people ask all the time.
Exactly, and that speaks to your mentality, your frame of mind, and your.
Yeah, but I think a lot of the people that say no, you know, there are a small, like, let's say there's 20% of the people that say no, I could never do that. I mean, that's not the actual number, but let's just say that for record here. Let's just say 20% of the people say I could never pull the trigger. You know. But when it really came down to it, and it was their life or somebody else, those same 20% of the people that say, oh, I could never hurt another person, would jump on a motherfucker and stick a fingernail file in the guy's eye if it came to protecting themselves or their children.
Right.
They just don't know they would until they have to. So.
And then there are those who say, I never hope I have to.
Yeah, well, I hope I never have to. I hope I never have to harm anybody, ever. And I hope no one ever tries to harm me. But I don't carry a gun every day because I think I'm going to use it. I always tell people, if you carry your gun because you think you're going to need it, then you're probably paranoid. If you carry your gun because you hope you never will, it's a different mindset. You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I was trying to get across is the fact that I think when people talk about training, you know, where most people equate training to actually pulling the trigger, actually training that physical action. And
You're talking
I
about the
throw out
psychological
there,
aspects of
right,
it.
I think it's more psychological. I think we need to really train our
Well,
minds more
I
than
think one of the most
anything.
important things along like what you're saying there psychologically is training people to know when to present their gun. Know that, okay, this is a situation where our gun should be in my hand and not in my holster. If people can learn that, they've learned 90% of what they need to know. And then the actual physical act of being able to get your gun from your holster to your hand is probably the most essential part of training. People always talk about follow-up shots, etc. I'm like, if you can't quickly and confidently get your gun from your holster to your hand, none of the other stuff matters. So I wish I saw more people practicing on getting the gun from their holster to their hand, as I do see them on making 300-yard shots or rapid fire shots, etc.
Right, right.
And unfortunately, a lot of ranges don't let you train getting the holster from your gun getting your gun from your holster to your hand. So it's usually up to a lot of people to do that at home. I do that at home a lot. I dry fire practice a lot at home, and my dry
Yeah.
fire practice includes drawing my gun. I just don't pull the trigger.
Yeah, I've talked to not only competition shooters, some of the best trainers, Travis Haley, the Frank Proctor, Jaeger. These guys will tell you that 90% of their, and that may be a little skewed, it's probably not 90, but you know, more than half of their training is done without actually firing a bullet. You know, you can do a lot of handling, manipulation, like you said, learning how to draw, learning how to change magazines, just overall fundamentals, manipulation, coordination can be done without actually pulling the trigger on a gun. Um,
That's 99% of the battle.
exactly. So.
Because even if you especially if you consider that, 97% of all self-defenses with a firearm don't involve pulling the trigger. So the quicker and more confidently you can present that firearm, the more likely that danger is to turn and run away.
And along those lines as well, we're talking about being prepared and the mindset. There is on that other side of the coin, there is that thing where people believe that the gun is like a talisman, that just because they have it, they don't need to fire it, that it's going to scare people away, the racking sound of the shotgun, all those stupid myths. And, you have to be cognizant of the fact that if you are going to carry that gun and if you are going to produce it in an engagement, okay, you have literally just introduced a gun into the engagement. Okay, so at least one gun is present. Okay? So your responsibility to be willing to use it, committed to use it, capable of using it, capable of defending it and protecting it. I see those as personal responsibilities, and they're not inherent behaviors. You need to be taught them. That's the training part, and then you need to practice them, which to me, practice is honing that skill, and more importantly, seeing where that skill fits into your personal beliefs, lifestyle, environment, and all of that. If you're taking, carbine 2, okay, how is that going to help you when you strap your gun on in the morning? I'm not saying it will or it won't, but are you aware of those things?
Well, yeah, and there's also a fine line to walk, too. And there's one of the things that gets said in the gun community all the time that just irks me to no end. It's like the most Rambo tactical wannabe dumbass thing I hear people say, and it's, if you pull your gun, you better use it. And that is the most retarded thing you can ever say with your firearm. Drawing your gun is the last thing. People say, shooting your gun is the last thing you ever want to have to do. Drawing your gun is the next to the last thing. So you don't want to have to actually shoot it. You have to be able to draw that distinction between, okay, I drew my gun, And you have to be cognizant of the fact that the vast majority of defenses from now on don't involve firing this gun. So you have to be able to make that split-second decision when you're drawing your weapon. Is this a situation where I draw and shoot? Is this a situation where presenting the gun is going to make the guy who's attacking me back away? Or am I in a situation where I'm presenting a firearm defensively, etc.? There's lots of times, the 90-something% of the time you draw that weapon, you're not going to fire. So you have to be able to make sure that you know you're not a fucking samurai. You don't have to draw blood before you can, resheath your sword. So keep that in your head. You have to know that when you draw your weapon, you're going to have to make that decision. Is this a time where I have to fire it, or is this a time where I'm hoping I won't have to fire it?
Right. Again, which speaks to mentality, mindset, and like you said, I think it was you that said it would be. I think we'd all be better served if we had some type of training course to tell, not to tell. That makes it sound like we're dictating, but to give people an understanding on when to pull their firearm, when to use lethal force. You know what I'm saying, in those situations.
And there are times you'll defensively pull your firearm and not offensively pull your firearm. I mean, if you're like, I was in my business one time and I swore to God someone kicked a door down. I heard a crashing noise. And I checked all the security cameras. I was in the back office. I looked at all the security monitors. I didn't see anything anywhere. I cycled through all the cameras, didn't see anything. But there's lots of places in our building that once someone got in, they could hide. So I kind of like, well, maybe I didn't hear anything. Maybe I just heard something outside or dump truck, something. But then I hear it again. So then I decide, I'm going to go investigate. And I didn't walk through the building and wait to pull my weapon. I pulled my weapon defensively and went through the building. A lot of people would say, well, you should have called the cops. I'm like, what? And tell them what? I heard a noise. And they'll come in like 2 hours maybe and make fun of me if nothing's there. So I went and cleared the building. It turned out I almost shot my ice maker because we just got one of those new great big industrial ice makers that day, and I had never heard it dumping ice into an empty bin before. And it sounded like someone kicking a door down. But, I defensively pulled my firearm before I walked into a bad situation. I didn't wait till after.
That ice maker was lucky.
It was. I walked in the kitchen, looked around, didn't see anything, and as I was walking out of the kitchen, boom, right behind me, and I whirled around, and it was that fucking ice maker. I was like, motherfucker.
I don't know why, but that's just one of the internet memes that gives me the biggest chuckle. My wife asked me why I carry a gun in the house. Decepticons, I told her. She laughed, I laughed, the toaster laughed. I shot the toaster. Optimus Ice Maker.
But it could have been, the brave little toaster you shot.
It may have been brave, but it wasn't too bright.
That is a good point.
I didn't have any flaming slices of rye launched at me.
Oh, I hate it when that happens.
So Stone, since we're talking about training, and I know you're big into the competition thing, one of the other hot topics, and I know you started to talk about this earlier before you invited me in, or I invited myself in.
It's all good.
The crossover. I mean, because everybody's bipolar nowadays. Oh, sport training will get you killed on the street, or street training will have absolutely no merits to you in the competition arena.
Yeah, that's why all those sports shooters are getting killed like wildfire on the streets every day. There's real scientific evidence behind that.
So Stone, what's your perspective on that? Like, what components, as opposed to being negative, let's say, what components of training do you think cross over well, and which do you think don't cross over well?
Sight picture or lack of point. When I say lack of, I meant lack of sight picture. Point shoot. I point shoot probably 80% of my competition targets, and I think that very, very very much carries over into a self-defense application. Because you're gonna, and that's another kind of hot button topic is, hold on, I'm getting way off. I'm thinking too much as I'm talking. When I feel like point shooting is essential for self-defense. I I've been in, knock on wood, I've never taken a life. Um, hope I never have to. I have been shot at. I have returned fire. The the likelihood that you're actually going to have time and the presence of mind to line up your two little, or your back sights and your front sight, line that up, is false in my opinion. I just don't think in that adrenaline, high pressure, moving situation you're ever going to have time to line up your shots. And so that's why I say point shooting or instinctual shooting is paramount for self-defense, and that's a big part of the competition arena as well. Um, and so I think that carries over, and then just the overall manipulation, the drawing, changing magazines. That's because you're doing that while moving. You're dropping mags. You're coming out of the holster on the move. You're doing all that manipulation while you're moving. So I think that lends itself well to a potential self-defense role as well. But then let me back up, because I asked Jaeger about that. Him being a former police officer as well and a security contractor. He's had bullets whizzing by his head, and I asked him that question. I said, "So, how do you feel about point shooting?" And he goes, "No, you should always be able to find your sight." And I called bullshit. I was like, I can't.
Yeah, I'm
believe
gonna
that.
call bullshit on that too. You got to be able to point. You got to be able to fire your weapon if you cannot get your arm fully extended, if you're in front of your face. Even you got to practice point shooting, firing from the hip, all of that. You never know when you're going to be in a situation where you don't have the luxury of extending your firearm and finding your sights.
All right. So he said that in all the times where he's been in conflict, that he's been able to find his sights, which it could be. I'm not gonna, the guy has no reason to lie to me, but I just don't feel like that's always going to be the case. And obviously, you could argue that there's definitely going to be situations where that's not practical or possible given the situation. Like Yankee said, if you're pinned down or you can't extend your arm, or you're having to just a myriad of reasons that could limit you from being able to do so. But so that's a big thing with a lot of trainers. A lot of trainers are tell you to find the sight, front sight press. So that's kind
Well,
of
that's an optimal situation, but in a lot of real life situations don't conform to the textbook. And a lot of times you don't get to extend your arm. You may not have room to extend your arm. You may not have time to extend your arm. It just you don't get to choose.
Yeah, people like to quote these average statistics. The average gunfight is this based on the FBI statistics. Well, the FBI is law enforcement shootings. Those shootings have a different dynamic. Civilian shootings, any shooting information actually is anecdotal, simply because there is no control. There is no standard to meet it up against. So if you have an engagement, if somebody's trying to mug you, when you're in contact distance, you're not going to physically be able to get your front sight focus unless you back up. And I have seen instructors that say, well, you should when you start your draw, you should back
start
up.
backwards.
Put space in there.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah, that is a technique. However, if you want to employ that technique, you better practice that and be able to move backwards under those situations of stress and not lose your balance.
If people are coming at you, going backwards with a firearm while you're trying to defend yourself is probably not the best tactical thing to do in the world anyway.
I would agree with you completely. So, and here's the other thing too, and I don't understand this. Adapt and overcome. You know, you can learn something from everyone, no matter who they are, no matter what it is. You know, all these things that anybody who's been in some sort of martial culture has heard their whole lives, at least if you're as old as me. This stuff seems to have flown out the window. It's like, when did anything become you should never? Okay, you should never do this, you should never do that. Granted, there are certain things that fall under
I
that
can tell you
umbrella.
when it became. I can tell you exactly when it became. You should never this and you should always that. It became when people were marketing and packaging a product that they were then selling for a profit regarding self-defense.
Exactly. The bottom line is the big never to any fight is you should never lose. Seriously, that's it. You know, that's the never. So yeah, in contact distance ranges, from, in my opinion, from the time your gun clears the holster and the muzzle is rotated to the target, okay, you should be able to engage a target from that point up until the point that you're at full extension. The distances that you will accurately and comfortably be able to do that are a result of how much you train. But is that necessary? Well, the guy's not mugging you from 15 feet away,
Well,
okay?
I once had an instructor. In fact, he was so adamant in doing it the way he was. You were paying him to teach you. I said, well, what if it's two people mugging me and one of them grabs me around the, wraps his arms around me from behind first, and the other one comes at me from the front with a tire iron or a knife? Wouldn't I want to be able to shoot from the hip? He said, well, no. First, you would free yourself from the guy that's grabbing you. I'm like, I don't have time to free myself from the guy that's grabbing me if someone's coming at me with a knife. Nope. First, you would free yourself from. I'm like, you would say that instead of just saying, yeah, you probably should be able to fire from the hip. They're so locked into their dogma of their self-defense tactic.
Exactly, and then we counter the hip firing boys are like, whoa, you know, I practice so much that I can fire from the hip 100 yards away. Kudos to you. It's probably a great YouTube video, but is it a skill that I'm going to entrust to my life when it's not necessary for me? No. It's nice to have. It's nice to be able to do. Absolutely, and it increases your survivability chances. Okay, but again, it's one more tool. If you discard everything else, you're doing yourself a disservice.
I can't hit anything at 100 yards. I can't see anything at 100 yards.
They haven't invented the laser big enough for your surgery yet.
I won't get LASIK surgery, so I'm just dealing with the fact that I can't see beyond 25 yards.
And back to the competition thing. Um, the mechanics of it are awesome, depending upon what sort of competition. There's a little bit of strategy and thinking that you need to apply before stages and things like that. The only caution that I have for people is somebody, I thought it was cute, somebody called them range fleas. When you pick up range fleas, is if those repetitions are the most repetitions that you do, then that's what's going to be your natural behavior. And those tend to be all, we lump them into the words administrative. Yeah, and
And
this goes
that's
back.
no joke, dude, because we do a lot of, and not to, I'll let you finish, but just real quick, that's,
Oh no, go ahead.
I've shot so much competition that you're absolutely right. You default to in a muscle memory, for lack of a better term. I know some people argue that there's really no such thing, but it's cognitive muscle or brain repetition, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But it's when I took the training class, because see, we do a lot of tactical reloads, or you're dropping magazines that may have 6 or 8 rounds left in it because you're gaming the stage, to be able to have a full mag. Change your mag while you're on the move. Never change a mag flat-footed. So again, we may drop a mag that has plenty of rounds in it in an average self-defense situation be able to game the stage. But anyway, the whole point of that was I've caught myself when I'm training for self-defense, like in tactical response, for instance, dropping damn near full mags and just dropping them and leaving them without even thinking about it. And knowing that in a real life gun battle, that could be a detrimental mistake. If I drop a mag that has rounds in it and leave it, and then I find myself without a mag, you know what I mean? It's just I'm a little long-winded there, but it goes to the fact that you do create a lot of, unless you really concentrate on separating your competition from your self-defense, you will inherently pick up horrible habits that could get you killed in a self-defense scenario.
So my habit of eating a Snickers bar while I'm shooting is probably not a good one because I'm going.
Absolutely.
Because 3/4 of the time at the range while I'm shooting, I'm also eating a candy bar. So.
Yeah.
Because I found if I don't, because I don't eat sugar normally because I'm pre-diabetic, so I don't eat a lot of sugar. But when I go to the range, I find that if not eating sugar makes me very shaky at the range. So I always take a candy bar. So it really calms me down. So I'm always eating a candy bar at the range.
Plus, the other thing too, I just want to throw in there, because we hear all these terms like, well, in times of stress, you're going to default to your level of training. That's not necessarily true. At times of defense, you descend to that which you have repeated the most. Okay, so for instance, if you train 100 hours a week or 100 hours a month or 100 hours a year, okay, that's a certain amount of repetitions of anything that turns a subconscious cognitive motion into conscious cognitive motion into a subconscious one. If, however, every single day you, for some reason, inappropriately handle your firearm, and you do it consistently every day, maybe you're not even aware of it, the way you grab it, the way you move it, the way you do, whatever it is, even though you don't recognize that at training, if you've repeated that action more times than you've repeated your training actions, that's the unconscious motion that you're programming.
Yeah,
Okay?
you can't go to a class and do it 3 times over 6 years, and then every other day of the week go sit in a lounge chair at the range or your backyard and fire lazily at targets and think the way you learned it at training is how you're going to do it.
Exactly. And a good one for this is Travis Haley, because he goes like entirely the opposite direction. It's like any time he unholsters his weapon, he does a full draw, okay, to the sight picture, okay, and then goes to ready. And in his theory is, why waste a draw? If for any reason I am taking my gun out of the holster, not an engagement, that gives me an opportunity to perform a repetition. And people don't realize through the normal course of their day how they're sabotaging all the effort that they're trying to put in developing the proper techniques when they are training or paying for training or practicing. So that's something to be aware of.
That's something that I've heard that him say it too, and I actually, whenever I take my gun out of my holster, I always do it in front of my safe, and I do that also because it's fun. You get to practice drawing your weapon with, and in your head, I'm drawing a loaded weapon, and you draw it normal position like you normally would in your safe, and then I point at the clearing bucket, clear the gun, put it away. If it's a gun I'm clearing. That's one of the reasons I keep a clearing bucket right next to my safe. I've shown that in videos before.
And again, surprisingly, a lot of people don't have one of those, and to me, it's just sort of dopey. One of the things that always fascinated me about pilots and being a pilot is they still, at every level, use written checklists, because you never count on your habits, you never count on your memory. Okay, you never know what level of stress you're going to be operating under. So there's written checklists. So you go through the checklist, and in my particular life, relative to how dangerous something is, I sort of tend to operate the same way. It's like, you want to develop those patterns consistently.
Are you a pilot, G?
A private pilot's license, yeah.
Oh, sweet.
I won't get on. I don't. I try never to get on planes unless if I can help it.
You'll get me on a little one before you'll get me on a big one.
I don't want to be on any of them. Although I used to fly on those two-person ultralights when I was a kid and thought it was the most fun thing in the world, but as an adult, I'm terrified of flying, so something happened somewhere. I'm not going to tell everybody what, but something happened somewhere.
I'm right there with you, Yankee. You couldn't pay me to get on a damn plane.
I prefer using train.
Yeah, I like train too. Someone said the other day, "Oh, trains are wrecking all the time." I was like, "Yeah." Every time a train wrecks, you hear 937 people survived, 2 died. You don't hear that when planes crash.
Yeah, that's true.
But one thing I want to add about the whole training thing, and this is something I've done videos on, and it's just a stance I take. I think training's awesome, and I think training can be fun, and I think training can be beneficial, but it's something that I never stress. I'm talking formal training, like going and taking a training course, etc. Because I think we fall into 2 traps when we do that. One, we fall into the trap that we think we're going to live our life in a way that we're going to be running into gunfights, and I think it kind of puts us into a mindset of thinking that's what we're looking for, and we don't need to stop. We can stop not taking chances because that's what we're hoping will happen. And 2, I think that it presents this idea that guns are such complicated items that you couldn't possibly use one successfully unless you're highly trained, and that feeds into the anti's position. And you just have to look in everyday society and see that every day a little 90-pound, 60-year-old woman defends herself successfully against a much larger person with a firearm.
Well,
so obviously you can
yeah,
do it without training.
yeah, you can obviously.
Yeah, nothing. You don't need training
No,
to operate a firearm.
yeah, but yeah, obviously they're not some complicated engineering feat to pull a trigger,
And
but
every day, and out of the 800 and something thousand times a year that people use a firearm to defend themselves successfully, I would be willing to bet that not even 2% of those people have been formally trained.
okay, but I'm definitely going to have to disagree or play devil's advocate on this one because just the fact that you don't need training to pull a trigger doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't have training.
No one said you shouldn't have it, but I'm not going to say you should. I'm not going to say you need it in any way.
Well, let's even take a step back here as far as the word training goes. So you go out and you buy a gun. It's 38 snub-nose revolver. Okay, it's got a manual of arms. Granted, it's a real simple manual of arms. Whether you read the manual of arms or you have the guy at the gun store explain it to you or somebody else explains it to you, there's a certain training in the mechanical operation of the machine. Okay, and this is the other thing too. People lump everything together. Training's not one big umbrella. It's what are you training? Okay, so in that context, you need to figure out how your gun works, if you want to call that training or whatever. Now, once you accept that, then Yankee's thing of like, yeah, without any formal training, I can operate this gun. Am I going to operate this gun? Okay, and then you take it up from there. And this is also something that I've become more sensitive to lately is the arenas of training and what I refer to as the old timers. Okay, before the sleeve tattoo bearded tactical carbine runners were out there were this whole other area of people out there. And a long time ago, like back in the 70s and 80s, you can go back to the 60s, but that's before me. Back in that day, it was law enforcement training, and it was very secretive, and the consensus was we don't want the general public to know our super secret tactics. And then that arena opened up, post Jeff Cooper thing with, we'll call it close encounter training, street, whatever you want to refer to it as, concealed carry training. That became available to the public. And you have these people like Louis Auerbach, Masad Ayub, of course, now I'm not going to be able to whip names off the top of my head, but there's this whole generation of people out there. Andy Stanford, John Farnham, the old timers. Okay, if you're intimidated or don't agree with or don't like the whole current Recoil magazine tactical operational thing because you feel it doesn't apply to you, I appreciate that completely. Be aware that there's a whole different level, philosophy, and area of instruction and training and practice out there for something that fits your lifestyle a little bit better. And these guys seem to be coming back a little bit more, which I like to see, because they literally did get dumped in the shadows when tactical became cool.
Like I said, and the tactical became cool because what I said earlier, when it became profitable to market a package. And it's, you know, we go in trends. Like, it's cool for everybody to have a beard and tattoos. It was cool for everybody to act like they're military when they're not military. I've always told a lot of these guys that, you know, on forums and even at the range that, you know, show up all tacked out and talking this and talking that. I'm like, you know, why don't you join the military? You're allowed, and, you know, we're law enforcement or something. Just, you know, join it if you're that into it. But it's just, and they act like, well, if you don't do it the way they say, then there's no way you can possibly survive. Reality aside, because reality does not support that decision whatsoever. It is the infomercial mentality with self-defense these days, where they create a fucking problem, and that problem is you're going to be swarmed by 10 armed men or 7 ninjas or whatever, and you've got to have 2 sidearms with 35 rounds or 30 rounds in each one of them, and know how to do barrel rolls while you're firing, or else you're not going to survive. So you absolutely have to take our course. They create a problem that doesn't exist and then give you a solution to something that you're never going to face. But they have to do it in a way that you're going to pay for it and pay a lot of money for it. And that's the thing that's a big disservice, I think, to the gun community as a whole, because the reality of guns they are the great equalizer. They make someone who's weak and small capable of defending themselves 99% of the time against someone who's bigger and stronger without any formal training whatsoever. They are not a complicated item. Point the end with the hole in it, point it away from you, and don't point it at anything you don't want to kill. Operating it is pulling a trigger. How hard is that? It's harder to work your car than that. So when we get away from the idea that guns are the great equalizer, guns are a simple tool that can be used by anyone effectively, guns require a minimal amount of skill to be able to use effectively, when we get away from that and we start selling this whole tactical, bearded, tattooed mentality to everybody, then we just feed into this idea that these are somehow these elite, dangerous, complicated machines that only the most elite and you know, scary looking among us can actually operate properly. And that is the worst thing to happen to the gun community in a long time, if you ask me.
You know, it's funny you should say that. Stone just asked me about flying. I've been into airplanes since I was a little kid. At one point in time, I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. And I remember the first time in upstate New York, I had no concept of what a private airport was. I mean, when I grew up, it was Kennedy and LaGuardia. So the first time I was in upstate New York, my grandfather took me to a private airport, and they have, like, you know, just a little rickety chain link fence, and, you know, you could almost reach out and touch the airplanes, and it was like just about mind-blowing experience for like a 10-year-old. So there's, of course, a pilot walking around, and he came over to the fence and started talking, and I was like talking to him, and his whole vibe was like, you know, pilots are special people, and someday maybe you too can be on the other side of the fence, and that whole same elitist bullshit Top Gun
The only
mentality.
thing I got to say to that is John Travolta.
Well, then like later in life, unfortunately, I was in my 20s and he was a little guy and he couldn't pick me up. I had run into this guy who was a pilot, and I knew nothing about like what you needed to do to become a pilot at that point, because, you know, in that period of time, those plans were crushed. And it was like one of those things, like, I've always wanted to do that. Well, why didn't you? It was like, I don't know. Well, like, get your butt up over the fence and come on, let's go. And that was like literally it. And that's, you know, again, that's the bipolar difference, like you said. It's available to anybody. It should be there for anybody. It's our natural right to be able to protect ourselves. In one capacity, it is a great equalizer. And any any connotation whatsoever from any side of the argument that you are DQ'd from this, barring like mental illness or stuff like that, but you are DQ'd for this because you didn't shop at aisle 7 of Tactical Closer Us. Okay.
Or because, you've got short fingers, you couldn't possibly be tactical enough, or you've got flat feet. It's not like that. It is an easily used item.
It's like the internet has taken 1911 bashing to such an absurd extreme. You would think that nobody was ever killed with one. Okay.
Well, actually, I think all of our soldiers that carried one were killed by somebody else.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, yeah, granted, it may not be the current state of the art, and it may not be tactically as advantageous as some other thing, but again, they push the argument to these caricature proportions where it's just like, no 1911 is ever fired. Every single one of them is a paperweight or a cigarette lighter, and until Glock came along, we didn't have any problems.
So those people, I always ask them, I was like, at what rate do people who carry revolvers or 1911s get shot and killed compared to the rate that people that carry SIGs or Glocks get shot and killed? And people always say, well, that's stupid. No one gets shot enough that carries for it to matter. And I'm like, well, yeah, then shut the fuck up.
I own a 1911 and I love it.
They're great guns. They have advantages and disadvantages.
I don't mind the fanboyism online. I mean, that happens throughout history. Chevy,
well, I'm not saying fanboy.
It's common, and I'm okay with it. It's just that I don't like that mentality, if you don't do this, you're not good enough to fire a gun, because that leads to things like state requirements for training to own a firearm or carry a firearm. And I've done the research, and states that have heavy requirements for training on firearms have no greater or smaller rate of accidents with firearms than states that have no training. In fact, 4 of the states that have absolutely no training have the lowest rates of accidents with firearms because they have higher gun culture in their states. So there's absolutely no link between safety training and accidents. I mean, because I think most people that choose to pick up a gun have enough common sense to acquaint themselves enough with the gun, familiarize themselves enough with the gun and safe operation of it to operate it safely on their own. And the people that don't, no mounting training is going to help those dumbass trailer park, mouth breathers. Some people are going to act crazy with a gun, even if you trained them for 10 hours to get it, they're still going to go back and act like an idiot with it.
Right, and some of our arguments are actually enjoyable and fun, especially like here at Gun Channels. The whole 9mm 40-45 thing, we toss that argument around simply because we've raised it to ridiculous proportions, and it's for entertainment value.
It's a running joke.
Exactly. But people who get their information off the internet, especially like when you refer to them as fanboys, what that does is, number one, you never form your own opinion. Number two, you accept the opinion of somebody else because of the production value of their video, or because of their vocabulary when they're typing an article. You don't know whether or not your choice is appropriate to you.
Yeah, they just take it on face value. It's like I made a video about that Canic gun that has a decocker on a single action only gun. And I'm like, that's mechanically a bad idea. And all these people would come in and like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. This person said it's awesome, so it's awesome. And I'm like, okay, tell me what's great about a decocker on a single action. And then all of them's response is just, fuck you.
Well, don't most of us here on Gun Channels have at least a 45 and a 9mm just in case?
I've got pretty much every caliber handgun you can buy that's common, from 22 all the way up to 50 AE 500 Magnum. So I don't play favorites. I cross the board. I like to think that if things ever get bad and shit hit the fan, and if I go out and if I can go out and rummage, steal, find, trade for a crate of ammo somewhere, I don't want to have to be that picky about which caliber I can get.
Right. Because too, it also gives you choices. Okay, what's appropriate. We talk about summer carry, we talk about winter carry. There's another training thing there. Again, the buzzword or the sound bite is train like you fight. Okay, well, if you don't fight, you don't know that yet. Okay, so how about train how you live?
I should train squealing in a high-pitched whine while flailing and scratching.
Like a prepubescent 12-year-old girl.
We're not talking about your sex life, Yankee.
Well, that too. What's the difference between sex and fighting? I've never seen the difference.
Danny DeVito, have you ever had angry sex? Is there any other kind? No, but so again, I, I love 1911s. I cut my teeth on them. Carried condition one for 20 plus years, and had no issues with it. There are some people though that's not appropriate for that's not,
I like 1911s. I don't like 1911 clones all that much, but
yeah, well, that's a preference thing, but again, too, like we were saying, nobody's ever gotten killed with a 1911. Oh, nobody's ever gotten killed with a revolver that I'm aware of. Like after 1890, I think it became illegal to die from
well,
a
I'm pretty
gun.
sure no one ever died from gunfire at all until they invented the 45 ACP.
There you go. But so again, you know, you do yourself a disservice whenever you buy into the binary choice, whenever it's A or B, whenever it's like, something is demanded somehow. Experience everything. Don't be ignorant. Don't close your mind. It doesn't matter how much you disagree with someone, how much you hate someone, how much you don't like, this particular gun or that or whatever, unless you go out and have your own experience of how it fits in to you completely, okay, you are absolutely doing yourself a disservice.
It's like I have a friend who he's got firearms. He's not a firearm guy. He's got a few. He's got a PX4 Storm. He's got a couple Winchester rifles. He's got a couple 22. He's got a 22 survival rifle that I bought him. He's got guns for emergencies. He probably goes and shoots once a year. He takes his guns out once a year, just the way he puts it. I just want to make sure they're still mechanically sound. And he shoots for like a half an afternoon once a year. Then he takes his guns home, unloads them all, puts them away, except for the one that he keeps loaded in his bedside safe, for emergencies. And he always says to me, "Oh, you probably think badly of me." And I'm like, "Why would I? You actually have firearms in your home that are mechanically sound, and you've known and you learned and you acquainted yourself with how to fire them and how to safely handle them, via the fact that you get them to and from the range all the time and haven't shot yourself or a family member yet. So you're way ahead of 99% of the people, as far as I'm concerned."
Exactly. The other thing too here, we want to talk about training, and this one comes up for me because the end of this year we get open carry in Texas, and this is the other all or nothing class. Is I'm an open carrier, blah
Is
blah
it
blah.
constitutional carry? Or you still have to have a permit.
You still have to have a permit, and more importantly, is they took the tag off that says that the police can't use you open carrying for reasonable suspicion
Like
or probable cause.
No Terry stops.
Correct. Okay, so that's the contention that they're having now. Again, it's Camp A, Camp B. People are citing statistics where this is the norm in other states and it hasn't been an issue, but already here in Texas, they're organizing their next round of protests, because if you are open carrying, the law enforcement can stop you and use that as a reason to validate your ID and the fact that you have a concealed carry license. But here's my point, okay? People don't realize, again, the bad advice. And what I mean by that is this. If you want to open carry to make a political statement, I understand that. In my opinion, there's ways that you can do it beneficially and detrimentally, and we've all seen it, and it's not the point of this chat. But as far as training goes, if you're 5 feet tall and you weigh 125 pounds and you're going to open carry, you better have some formal weapons retention training. And that doesn't mean going out and buying a stage 2 or a stage 3 security holster. It means actively being able to protect your weapon from being taken. Okay? Most crimes on the street are crimes of opportunity. Okay? Now, if you're 6'3" tall and you weigh 300 pounds and you're open carrying, the average criminal predator is going to look at you a certain way, very differently than if you're that 5 foot tall person. Okay, and people don't understand this concept. Is it's not about whether or not I open carry or I don't open carry, and this is my hard line. Is when is it appropriate, and do you have the specific skills and awareness to be able to do that, within your comfort level and reasonably safely? Because you can cite all the statistics that you want, but the fact remains is that open carriers do have their weapons taken from them. Concealed carriers have their weapons taken from them. That's a fact of life. Okay? And in this particular business, it to me, the adage is, it's not the odds, it's the stakes.
Yeah, you got to know how to keep someone from taking that weapon from your holster. Beware of where your holster is. That's why I like people who carry small of back. I always say, for one, it's a really dangerous place to carry for your health. But two, that's like the perfect place that if you bend over in a store and someone sees your gun and they want to take opportunity to take your gun, it's hard for you to defend that position. So, think about that when you choose how you want to carry. How am I going to defend this gun if someone tries to take it from me? And, like I say, I've always been the perfect size. I'm not big enough that anyone wants to prove anything by picking on me or fighting with me, and I'm not small enough that anyone sees me as a target. I was 6'1", ranged anywhere between 200 and 250 pounds most of my life, so I was that sweet spot of, there were easier targets than me, and there was nothing to prove by fighting with me. So I've never had to face that, but I know people that are, since because they're small, get picked on all the time, and I know people that were, because they were big, got targeted all the time because people had something to prove. So either way, you need to know how to defend your weapon if you're going to carry it. That's part of carrying it.
I agree with you completely. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't. It's like when you go out and you buy a car, you don't drive home with the feeling that you are now a licensed mechanic, a professional auto instructor, and yada yada yada. Okay, the car has a manual of arms, and yet in the firearms industry, for some reason, or when we're talking about firearms, it's different. I mean, I've seen people, again, it's like a magic charm. Because I have this, I am now qualified to do this to it or do that to it. Or I suddenly, because I now have this gun and it has no external safety, I've just taken like a half a second off my draw to first shot time. People have these delusions based on, again, whatever, their egos, the internet, however they've developed it. Okay, I'm not saying that people don't have different levels of aptitude and don't need different types and kinds of training, and everybody has strengths and weaknesses that they pick up on. But again, the fact remains is it's not automatic. You need to be taught how to do some of this stuff, or at least be the beneficiary of somebody else's experience, whether they've had a good experience or a bad experience.
Stone Guy still here, or did we just hijack his chat?
I don't know. No, I'm just enjoying not having to talk for once. You guys are
as much as we're enjoying not having to listen to you.
Absolutely. Amen, brother.
I'm sorry if we hijacked your chat.
No, hell, that's the whole point, man. Like I said, it's hard to always be able to carry a chat and keep a conversation going when you're only one of a couple people that are talking. So, and no offense to well, Moon's not even here now, so
that has no trouble. That blowhard can talk through a whole chat.
Yeah, I mean, some people just aren't conversationists. They just.
Oh wait, did I say out loud? I meant to type that in the side chat.
So I actually enjoy having people in here that talk, and I think that's the whole point of these chats, is if you get someone here that can just start talking and strike up a conversation, then it makes the rest of the chat kind of flow.
Well, I'm here to get, more or less to pick your brains and, just, be part of the conversation.
Absolutely.
Do you mean open your mind?
I'm trying to keep an open mind, yes.
That's what it's all about, man. That's.
I mean, I'm looking at going and doing the whole concealed carry route, but I do glove box carry in South Carolina because it is legal without a permit. So there's that.
Well, along with a cop not fitting in my pocket, neither does a glove box.
Right. Yeah.
I know, but it's what I can do right now. So.
At least you own a gun. That's better than nothing.
I own
Some,
multiple.
sometimes.
So I guess we'll give you some slack, but yeah, you definitely need to carry now without incriminating yourself. So you don't carry then.
I want to, but South Carolina's laws, they're they're different. We'll just say that.
Right.
How so?
Well, the problem is, even if our House goes and puts a constitutional carry bill by like a 70 or 80% landslide, it has to go through the Senate, and it dies in obscurity in the Senate because the Senate decides, since it's the chairman is a rhino, I'm not going to do anything because I used to be a Democrat back in the 80s.
What does that have to do with going to wherever you need to go to in South Carolina and getting a concealed carry permit? What do you need to do to have a concealed carry permit in South Carolina right now?
8-hour training course, and I have to get fingerprinted.
And we know if you get fingerprinted, they're going to deport you to Mars or wherever you came from.
You never know. You never know.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, that's his biggest contention is he doesn't want to get fingerprinted. Which, again, it's if you're strictly standing on the morals of it's a right, I shouldn't have to pay and have a permit for a constitutional right, I can understand to a degree, but there again, it is what it is. It's not going to change now, so why not play the game and at least have the ability to protect yourself or your loved ones?
Exactly. Whether or not you agree with the game, whether or not you play by the rules or not, the fact remains is
take your chances. I mean,
right.
The
The fact remains is that the game goes on. So you need to decide, and I agree the double-edged side of the coin of, to pay and to go through the process to get permission to do something is my natural right. I understand the moral conviction of that. But then on the other side of the coin, if you don't carry a gun, then what are you saying about your moral conviction of this quote-unquote natural right that you believe so firmly in? So there's your catch-22.
Yeah.
My whole thing is I'm going to carry a firearm to protect myself and my family, and if I have to go down and fill out a form to do it, I'm going to if that's my only option, because carrying illegally is not an option for me because I am not going to go to prison and be away from my family. So to me, the only option is to pay the fee. Because
I'm not illegally carrying.
I feel far more strongly about my need to protect my family than I do to make some stand about something that's ridiculous anyway, because if the government wants your fucking fingerprints, they'll get your fingerprint. Yeah, so.
The government's already got your fingerprints. I mean, it's happened, prior to, for 99% of the population, you've been fingerprinted way prior to the point in time where you're old enough to get a CCW.
Well,
Right.
Yankee has because he's been in the
They
military.
fingerprint kids in school now as part of the school thing, and it's just,
Anybody who's been in the military has been printed.
yeah. And I remember my kids came home one day from school and like, we got fingerprinted today for the the missing child thing. I'm like, oh well, I didn't know they were going to do that.
As a business owner, I've had that. I had the sheriff's department come in and do a presentation where they bring like a mobile crime lab to the businesses, and all your customers and your employees, all their kids get jackets. They fingerprint them, they do photos, they do bios, they do whatever, and I'm sitting there in my brain going, welcome to Nazi America, and everybody else is going like, oh, this is like so
This is
awesome.
so great, yeah.
If anything ever happens, all I have to do is make a phone call and they can pull little Billy's jacket, and I'm like, yeah, and there's his yellow sheet, and there's his, little Billy's on the corner selling crack.
All right.
Well, if little Billy's selling crack on the corner, he's probably going to get printed anyway.
Yeah, and before you know it, we're all going to have little armbands.
God, I hope not.
Well, they gave them. Actually, it's funny you should mention that. They gave them like some little cutesy badges that said like, I've been blah blah blah. I'm in the blah 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 program or something like that. It was basically like a no kidnap zone. If you want to equate it to a no gun zone.
I think that's from a federal grant. So
You flip it over, it says I'm not Jewish.
Oh, God. Are you trying to get somebody to say, and on that
I
note,
told
in your own chat?
I actually made up a sign not too long ago, just playfully, and put it up in the kitchen and informed my family that this is a no fucking bitching zone. And I was informed really quickly that that did not hold much water. So those no nothing zones, they don't work. No gun zones, no bitching zones, nothing. None of them work. All they do is get things thrown at you as you're called all kinds of nasty names.
Then by extension, the no kidnapping zone didn't work?
Yeah, that won't work either.
Oh, bummer. Guess we'll have to go back to the hand sanitizer and bubble wrap to keep little Jimmy safe.
Yeah, or just have multiple kids in case you lose one or two.
That's right.
That's what I call my little one, the spare.
Wow. That's wrong.
Oh, that was a good one. Well, guys, that was a good chat. I think we actually stayed on topic for the majority of the chat, and good conversation. So I appreciate.
Oh, thanks to Stone Guy.
Right? Hey, I carried the first half, so I appreciate everybody showing up, and for those of you out in the audience that bared with us and watched, I appreciate you tuning in. We'll do it next Thursday. Next Thursday is Yankee. He'll be doing his at 10 Eastern, so I'll do mine right at 9 Eastern next Thursday. Run for an hour, and then Yankee Marshall does his at 10 Eastern every other Thursday. Real quick, we need to do a patch giveaway. We do a daily patch giveaway from gunchannels.com. It's gunchannels.com/DPG daily patch giveaway. Unfortunately, I closed out my YouTube window, so I don't see.
I have the gun channels window open if you want.
Yeah, just pick someone from Gun Channels here.
Okay, let's see. I will pick.
I've got YouTube open.
Well, he's just gonna pick it from Gun Channels.
All right.
I'm gonna pick Grand was pretty active for the chat.
There you go. Yeah. All right. So, Grand Man, you win the patch. So
He had a lot of good comments in there.
since you're already in Gun Channels, just go to the front page, Gun
I would
Channels.
suggest getting the Yankee Marshall patch. That's the best
There you
one.
go. Daily patch giveaway. Go fill out the little form with all your shipping address, shipping information, and then choose your patch, and we'll send you a patch out. Again, appreciate everybody tuning in. For those of you on the panel, appreciate you participating. Thanks for all the support, and we'll see you next time, guys.
Thanks for having me, Stone.
Thanks for having me.